Another headache for the UK government. This one's in Northern Ireland. It began when the power-sharing agreement collapsed in February. If the parties don't form a new executive, the region faces fresh elections or direct rule from London. So is this another political crisis for the United Kingdom? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Now, a political stalemate in Northern Ireland has put the UK government in a tough spot. It's got two options: to force the region to hold new elections or to take back control and rule it from London. Now, the last time this happened, it took 5 years to give power back to Belfast. The current deadlock means Northern Ireland's effectively been without its devolved government for 3 weeks. And now that the deadline for parties to form a new executive has passed, the UK has a legal obligation to step in. Now, it all began when the late Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness withdrew his party from the Northern Ireland government. Now, that triggered elections that were held on March the 2nd. But the two biggest parties, the Democratic Unionist Party and McGuinness's Sinn Fein, have so far failed to form another coalition.
The decision of Sinn Féin not to nominate today and thus block the creation of a new executive is very regrettable and damaging to all of the people that we represent.
Well, Sinn Féin, on the other hand, says it's the DUP that's blocking agreement on a number of social issues, including gay rights. Neither party wants the UK Parliament to take the reins again, but they may have no choice.
We're rapidly approaching the point at which Northern Ireland will not have an agreed budget. This is not sustainable and will have consequences for public services. We now have a short window of opportunity to resolve outstanding issues and for an executive to be formed. Everyone owes it to the people of Northern Ireland to grasp that and provide the political leadership and the stability that they want.
Well, politicians in Northern Ireland and in Westminster say they want to restore stability because the fragile peace the region is enjoying wasn't easy to establish. It was reached after 30 years of sectarian violence known as the Troubles between fighters who wanted to stay in the UK and those who wanted to be part of a united Ireland. 3,600 people were killed before the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998. It set up a power-sharing government between the two sides. But even still, there have been political crises over the years. The biggest one was in 2002, which was the last time the UK imposed direct rule. Until now, polls in Northern Ireland have repeatedly suggested most people want to stay in the UK, but that was before the Brexit referendum. Most Northern Irish citizens voted to stay in the EU. Time for us to introduce our guests now. Joining us from Belfast, we have Brian Rowan, journalist and author of Unfinished Peace, Thoughts on Northern Ireland's Unanswered Past. And in Dublin, we have Eamon Malley, a journalist, historian and author of Fight for Peace, Secret Story Behind the Irish Peace Process. And in London, we have Ruth Dudley-Edwards, also a journalist, historian and author of The Seven, The Lives and Legacies of the Founding Fathers of the Irish Republic. Welcome to you all. Brian, let's start with this stalemate. It's been described as a crisis. What's preventing the DUP and Sinn Féin from forming a new power-sharing government?
Well, it's not just between the DUP and Sinn Féin. There are other players in this negotiation. But some of the big standoff issues within this current round of talks, the question of the legacy of Northern Ireland's violent past. How do you address the questions of it? What is the process you need? And that's not just about the DUP and Sinn Féin. That brings the British government and the Irish government into that discussion as well. This, the sixth attempt in 10 years to agree a process on legacy. That process in which many questions will be asked across many sides. And here again, that issue is stuck in the political mud. There are other issues about what a partnership government, what a power-sharing government is meant to be. Sinn Féin raising concerns and criticisms some months ago that we almost had a return to one of the ghosts of the past, the DUP trying to run Stormont in terms of one-party rule. So proper partnership needs to be worked out, a legacy process needs to be worked out, and other issues, including an Irish Language Act, is another of the sticking points within these talks.
And coming to you, Ruth, in London, it sounds very much as though the issues that were intractable so many years ago are still overshadowing this current situation in Northern Ireland, despite the much vaunted Good Friday Agreement.
Well, yes, it seems like that, but I think we mustn't forget that the key point is that Martin McGuinness died, and Martin McGuinness did actually want to keep the executive going. He had invested quite a lot of personal reputation in that, and I think it probably would have survived okay if he was still there. But now that he's dead, and he had remarkable diplomatic skills, it should be said, now that he's dead, Gerry Adams doesn't have the same investment at all. But Ruth, I think he's very happy to let it go if necessary.
But Ruth, wasn't it Martin McGuinness who actually pulled the plug on the then power-sharing executive?
Oh, he did indeed, but he did because he knew they couldn't actually hold it together without him. Because Martin McGuinness used to keep the base of Sinn Féin happy, the hard people in Sinn Féin. They had a great respect for him because of his violent past. And because he had a considerable reputation as a commander, an IRA commander. And Adams doesn't command the same respect at all. So I think McGuinness knew there was no possibility of it surviving him. So he decided with Adams to turn it to party advantage. Now, where I don't agree with Brian, I mean, I have great respect for Brian and his extraordinary work over the years, but I don't think they particularly care about the issues. Adams thrives on a crisis, and they're making a crisis out of Brexit. And his eye all the time is on elections in the Republic of Ireland. That's where his focus is. I think the legacy issue, say one thing about that, what Sinn Féin want there is a process which will end up with any state killers being charged and the IRA getting away with it. When you consider that Martin McGuinness was a mass murderer and had been ordering murders as late as 1997, and he got away with it scot-free, so you can hardly expect policemen and soldiers to take terribly well, or indeed the British government,
all right,
to the notion of the complete unfairness.
Can I jump in there and turn to Eamon? Eamon, it sounds as though there are very, very deeply seated issues and reservations concerning the entire establishment of this coalition authority, if you like. Can they do it? Will they get over these objections and form some sort of executive, or the alternative is, we understand, either a new round of elections or direct rule from London?
Sometimes I wonder whether we're speaking with an historian when I listen to Ruth Dudley Edwards. What is she talking about? Where has she been all those years? Is she a mind reader? Is she telling us she was inside the head of Martin McGuinness in his dying days when he decided to collapse that assembly? What bogus nonsense is this she's speaking? Is she suggesting that there's nobody capable of negotiating within republicanism because Martin McGuinness has departed this world? What nonsense. She has no understanding, quite clearly, evidently, of the modus operandi of republicanism. There has been and continues to be a kitchen cabinet there, which has been in existence for years, a central kitchen cabinet which actually examines every manifestation. Now, I make no apologies whatsoever, and I have been critical of the modus operandi of the IRA and the killings and the abuse at the hands of the IRA for decades and decades. But there's a basic misunderstanding here. Martin McGuinness concluded that this was not a functional executive, that the aspects of the Good Friday Agreement had not been implemented, were not being implemented. And I talk with the Democratic Unionist Party every day. I'm not a satellite journalist. I live in Belfast. And I know the mind of the Democratic Unionist Party because I engage them, I talk with them, I have a discourse with them on an ongoing basis. I know precisely where that party stands in Irish language.
Are they going to do it then, Eamon? Are they going to do it? Are they going to resolve their differences? No?
Not in the short term. Yes, differences will be resolved in the longer term. This is an ongoing process. We've had the same difficulties down the years on so many other aspects of the Northern Ireland problem. Take policing, for example. We had the Nigel Dodds and these guys hollering and shouting and saying there would be no devolution of policing, it would never happen, all this type of thing. And at the end of the day, policing is under the control and the watchful eye of a policing board with representatives of all the political parties and independent appointees. Now, the same with the Irish language. The bottom line is, when it comes to the Irish language, there are two divisions within the Democratic Unionist Party. There's a section which abhors anything which has any smack whatsoever of Irish or Gaelic life about it. There's another section, and that section of the Democratic Unionist Party see or view Sinn Féin as having, in their parlance, weaponised the Irish language, and as a result of that, they want nothing to do with the Irish language. But this will pass. There will be an Irish Language Act. In fact, Ruth may not know, but in the current construct as put on the table and presented by the Democratic Unionist Party, they created an environment in which they are tilting and at the existence and the acknowledgement of the Irish language, appointing an Irish language commissioner along with an Ulster Scots commissioner.
All right, Eamon,
and that is stage one.
Eamon, can I just ask you this? How had they managed to coexist before and now seemingly not able to get over these problems that you're so comprehensively outlining? I mean, what's changed?
Well, I'll tell you what has changed. Arlene Foster, the current leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, she has observed what happened to the former leader and founder member of the Democratic Unionist Party, Ian Paisley, when he espoused liberalism within the Democratic Unionist Party, and when he found a kindred spirit in the person of Martin McGuinness. They discovered each other, they found each other, they discovered their Irishness, their sense of humour, their capacity for storytelling. Mr. Paisley was dumped by his own party, ditched by his own party. Then Peter Robinson came around. Peter Robinson, he leaned towards liberalism as well, started going to GAA matches, Irish football matches, etc. There was no tolerance for this within the Democratic Unionist Party. Arlene comes along, Arlene Foster, she becomes the leader of that party. And she is simply saying, I'm not going to fall into this ambush experienced by my previous leaders, and I'm going to take a tough stance. Bottom line, that's where it is. And there was frost between Arlene Foster and Martin McGuinness on many, many issues, and that's why the whole thing fell apart.
And so, Brian, they've been given the Easter holidays, haven't they, to come up with some sort of solution. Again, I'm asking, can they do it? Will they do it?
Well, I think this time they need to do it properly, Martine, which means they need more time to get it right. And where I would take issue with Ruth is that the issues are important. The legacy issue keeps pulling our politics back into the period, that decades-long conflict. So until you have a process that addresses the past and addresses it properly, it is always going to be there as that weight holding politics in the mud. Ruth mentioned the prospect of soldiers and police officers being brought to the courts and going to jail. We had a Good Friday Agreement that released people from jail. Are we really looking for a process now that sends people to jail? So I think the process we need in terms of the past is a process that delivers as much information, the maximum amount of information from all sides that is possible. I don't believe that there will be absolute truth from any side, never mind all of the sides. And I used a sentence recently where I said it was time to stop lying about the truth. And what I mean by that is that it's time to be more honest about what truth in terms of our past will be and not be. People are not going to get definitive answers. And those in policing and in justice know that in terms of any investigative process of the past, there are going to be very few cases that go to the court and go to jail. So we need to work that process out properly. And what I think we need is international help to work that process out. We've got 5 political parties and 2 governments involved in these consultations and negotiations now for the best part of 10 years. They're too close to it, Martine. And that's why I think we need someone with that outside eye and international experience who can step into our space and try to find a process that will not answer all of the questions of the past, but try to provide some more information on the past and the maximum amount of information on the past from whatever corner of the conflict that has been asked for from relatives who lost loved ones.
Ruth, coming to you again in London, these issues run deep, don't they, with all communities, with all political parties involved. The backdrop to all of this, of course, is the Brexit vote. We've got to remember that Northern Ireland, as a province, voted to remain within the EU. So how far is the Brexit process, which we now know is underway, colouring or muddying the waters of Northern Irish politics?
Oh, I think it is considerably. And this is where I say again that Gerry Adams thrives on a crisis. I mean, he said only the other day one shouldn't waste a good crisis. And I think he's using Brexit and using this to stoke up a particular kind of rage. Now, Eamon was being very fierce there. I think that Martin McGuinness truly did matter. I know there's a kitchen cabinet. I know quite a lot, actually, about all this stuff. I also know that the DUP did not behave well in the last few months. I know all that. But the point about McGuinness was that he was exceptionally able and he had an exceptional reputation with the hard men. And he was able to get away with what his successor hasn't got a prayer of getting away with, even if she wanted to. She's a mediocrity. McGuinness was a killer, a terrible killer, but he was not a mediocrity. He was a remarkable man with a very, very strong personality, great charisma.
Okay.
And I think he would have kept it going. On the legacy thing, can I just say I think the only way out is an amnesty, because there isn't a hope in hell that the IRA, members of the IRA, would tell the truth. And the only people that can be got easily, really, are the people with records. So it's always going to be the state actors. And nobody's going to give witnesses statements against the IRA. Very few people would, because they're terrified.
Let's come to Eamon. Eamon,
so it's not manageable.
I'm quite taken aback by how our conversation, which I'd hoped would be projecting forward, is taking us back to, again, to these deep divisions. There's great hurt in the community of Northern Ireland, isn't there? But I would like to look at the current scenario. Ruth has suggested that Gerry Adams may be exploiting the current dissatisfaction, if you like, with Brexit in Northern Ireland. I'm wondering how. We know Sinn Féin have called for another referendum.
Ruth, she's not at the match, this lady. She doesn't know what's going on in Northern Ireland. She's a satellite commentator. Take it from me. There is a genuine desire within republicanism to have an executive restored at Stormont. A genuine desire. But the bottom line is, what's on the table is 1,000 miles away from what's being sought. Now, for example, what is going on in London now is, in terms of the whole question of potential prosecution, where there's a prima facie case of soldiers linked to illegal activity in Northern Ireland, there's an attempt now to set due process aside. This is extraordinary in a democracy in this day and age. You think of it, setting due process aside, that's essentially what the British government and the backbenchers, the Tories, are pressing for at this moment in time. Now, the upside or the downside of that potentially, if they had any integrity, would be ultimately for either the Chief Constable or the Director of Public Prosecutions to resign. This would be an absurdity in any other democracy in the world, where you are trying to introduce statutes of limitations, whereby even if there is prima facie evidence, you don't prosecute.
All right. Okay,
this
Eamon,
is an absurdity.
Let me try and shepherd you back to the question, and that is, Eamon, if you're suggesting that this is going to take some time indeed for these issues, these really important issues to be resolved, what's going to happen now then? The British government, the UK government will have absolutely no option but either to impose a new round of elections, which I'm sure that the province could well do without, or direct rule.
Well, the bottom line is, at this stage, I don't think anybody has worked out where we're going. And we have a Prime Minister in Theresa May who's so interested that she went to Scotland at least twice. She went to Wales. She didn't bother her head coming to Belfast. Can you imagine, on the eve of the signing of this document, she didn't bother to visit the people of Northern Ireland? That's how much she cares about Northern Ireland. And then you have James Brokenshire standing up in the House saying that she's centrally involved in the ongoing negotiations at Parliament buildings. My eye, centrally involved. She isn't connected whatsoever with what's going on in Northern Ireland.
All right.
The only common sense that it...
Eamon, let's just listen to what Theresa May had to say in the statement that she made to the House of Commons at the very same time, of course, that the letter was delivered into the hands of the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk. Let's hear what she had to say with specific reference to Northern Ireland.
We want to maintain the common travel area with the Republic of Ireland. There should be no return to the borders of the past.
All right, not very much at all, but Brian Rowan, there in that, I think, 7-second clip, she was addressing one of the fundamental issues that affects Northern Ireland and, of course, the Republic, and how they relate to each other. Explain for us, and whether that, what she said in the House, offers any assurance to the people of Northern Ireland.
Well, at this time, I think people are dealing with the fears and concerns of Brexit, and those fears and concerns will not be properly addressed until there is the fine detail about what all of this means. So Theresa May says there won't be a border, there won't be a hard border, but people say there is no such thing as a soft border. So they want to see the outcome of all of this, and the very mention of border and the suggestion that we might have the type of border that we previously had, again, that raises another of the ghosts of the past. But just to come back into our own negotiation at this stage, I think Brexit is playing within it. There is no doubt about that. And these other issues that I mentioned to you, legacy, language and proper partnership, are all a big part of that discussion. It is a package. It needs to be sorted out as a package. And whether we can get this done in 3 weeks from now, I just think that is unrealistic. We had a year ago an agreement that was called a fresh start. It turned out to be a false start. And I think this process has limped from one crisis into another crisis over a period of many years now. So this time, I think it is the time to try to get it right. There is this issue about the nature of the talks, who's chairing them, who should be chairing them. There is a view here among a number of the parties that James Brokenshire, as part of the British government, is a player within that negotiation and shouldn't be in any way seen as a facilitator or as a chair. And that's why I think there is this argument for a process to be properly constructed, to have an independent chair, someone with international clout who comes in and tries to pull this process together and tries to get an agreement that this time will stick.
All right, Eamon, you're in Dublin, the capital of the Republic of Ireland. What's the view from there?
Well, again, there's rather a laissez-faire attitude when it comes to Northern Ireland. I have been critical of Theresa May, but the reality is Enda Kenny hasn't been to Northern Ireland for a long time. The other thing, let's face reality. The shape of the border in the future has got nothing to do with Theresa May. That's in the gift of Europe. Europe will decide what sort of a border obtains in terms of that border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Europe will decide whether there are tariffs, etc., to be applied in cross-border trade or interstate trade per se. So we're not talking, she's not talking reality when she's talking about this. The interesting thing was yesterday, in a correspondence with Mark Durkan of the SDLP, David Davies, who's negotiating on behalf of the British government, he told Mark Durkan that in the eventuality of a majority vote of people in Northern Ireland wanting to form a single island, a united Ireland, then Northern Ireland would not have to reapply on their Article 49 for readmission to Europe, that they could become aligned with the Republic of Ireland as obtains and become centrally and a central part of the European community. That is a rather significant comment from David Davis, but I understand he's not saying that on his own. I think that's coming straight from Europe.
At that point, I have to say thank you all very much indeed. We've run out of time. Brian Rowan, Eamon Malley and Ruth Dudley Edwards. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm sure we've only touched the surface, haven't we, of this very deep and intriguing subject, but thank you all very much indeed for now. And as ever, thank you for watching as well. You can see the programme again anytime you like by going to the website aljazeera.com. If you want more discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. I'm @Martine Dennis. So thank you from me and the whole team for joining us.